Have you ever stopped to really think about how you learned language? With it, this smooth, gradual unfolding, like a flower blossoming, or maybe something else, more, I don't know, fragmented, like piecing things together. Today we're doing a deep dive into one of the most foundational theories out there about language acquisition. That's Noam Chomsky's language acquisition device, or the LAD. And we're going to unpack why this theory, which is, really widely accepted, might not actually describe everyone, particularly folks who process language differently, gestalt language processors or GLPs. So our mission today is to explore why the LAD is still so dominant, even with these, descriptive gaps, and what other ways of understanding a language might actually offer us. Get ready for hopefully some surprising facts and maybe a few aha moments along the way. Okay, so let's start with that classic view. For decades, really, the main idea about how we acquire language has centered on Chomsky's LAD. Let's dig into that. What exactly is this device meant to be? What's the idea behind it?
Right. So the LAD, it was introduced as a theoretical placeholder, basically an innate thing inside our brains, an internal module. The core idea is that kids are sort of pre-wired with a set of universal grammar rules.
Universal grammar.
Okay. Yeah, and the ability for what's called recursive syntactic structure. That just means this innate capacity to build endlessly complex sentences from basic parts.
Like building blocks you can keep adding to.
Exactly, nested building blocks. And Chomsky argued this device lets children pick up language super fast, even if they don't hear that much of it.
Right, even with limited input.
Precisely. And here's the really crucial underlying assumption. If language learning doesn't follow this innate, rule-based, syntax-first pattern,
Then it's seen as a problem.
exactly, then it's considered, a disorder, a delay, some kind of dysfunction.
So it's this really powerful concept. We're all born with this universal grammar blueprint, and language just kind of unfolds naturally from that, almost like it's on a schedule.
Mm-hmm.
But, and this work is fascinating, what if that's just not how everyone learns? What happens when a model that says it's universal doesn't match up with someone's actual lived experience?
Well, that's exactly the point for many people, especially autistic and disabled individuals who are gestalt language processors or GLPs. For them, language often doesn't arrive as a set of these generative rules, the ability to just make up new grammatical sentences on the spot,
Right.
or as a syntax first thing. Instead, for GLPs, language comes in wholes.
Holes, like what?
Think of fragments, chunks of speech, whole scripts maybe from movies or songs, echoes, even just the musicality, the intonation. It's not built piece by piece. It's remembered as a whole unit, often tied to a specific feeling or moment.
Wow. So, like that scavenger idea we started with, you're piecing together these meaningful chunks you find around you, things that feel safe or sound like they mean something important. That image alone, it really starts to push back against decades of linguistic theory, doesn't it?
It really does.
Can you give us some more concrete examples? How do GLPs actually use this kind of language day to day?
Sure. So instead of building with language like Lego bricks, right, smaller pieces first,
Yeah?
GLPs use these gestalts. Often their whole scripts recalled from, say, a favorite film, a song, or maybe something someone said during an emotionally charged moment. And it's really important to understand this isn't just meaningless repetition or parroting.
It sounds meaningful to them.
It is deeply meaningful. It carries a rich internal logic for the person using it. Meaning is absolutely primary here. Grammar, well, if it comes, often comes much later, as these big chunks, these gestalts, maybe get broken down.
Okay. So meaning first, structure later.
Exactly. And crucially, they rely on contextual repetition, hearing that chunked in a meaningful situation and the emotional connection to those wholes, not on some abstract innate rule set.
This makes me think, beyond these individual experiences, is there other evidence out there? Stuff that directly challenges the LAD's claim to be universal.
Oh, absolutely. There's a really fascinating case, an autistic boy in Morocco. He learned fluent English mostly just by watching YouTube videos.
Really? With little live interaction?
Very little live human interaction, according to the reports. Now, this kind of challenges both Chomsky's LAD, because where are the innate rules activating? And it also pushes back on theories that really emphasize social interaction as the driver of language learning.
Because he learned differently.
Right. His language seemed to come through pattern recognition, repetition, and affect the emotional connection to the material. Or just think about echolalia.
Right, the repeating of words or phrases.
Yeah, which is so often pathologized in, clinical settings, seen as non-functional. But increasingly, especially from lived experience researchers and autistic advocates, it's understood as deeply meaningful, it's strategic, it's communicative.
How so? What functions does it serve?
Well, it can be regulatory, helping to manage sensory input or emotions. It can be expressive, communicating a feeling tied to the echoed phrase. It can even be narrative, telling a story through these echoed chunks.
So it's not a glitch in the system.
Not at all. It's a method, a valid way of communicating and processing.
Okay, so if we take these examples, the boy learning from YouTube, the meaningfulness of echolalia, it seems the LAD doesn't just miss the GLP experience. It actively frames it as, like, broken
Yeah.
or disordered. What are the real-world impacts of looking at it that way?
And that's where it gets really serious. The consequences are profound. It leads to misunderstanding, misdiagnosis, and interventions, therapies that are often aimed at compliance.
Compliance, meaning trying to get them to talk like everyone else.
Exactly. Getting a GLP to mimic typical analytic language development rather than truly understanding and supporting their natural way of communicating. GLPs can internalize this. They're sometimes taught implicitly or explicitly to feel shame about scripting or echolalia.
And it's dismissed as just noise, right?
Dismisses noise or meaningless stimming. And critically, this can impact access to resources, funding, support services, educational programs. These can be denied if a child isn't acquiring language on time or in the right way, according to this one specific model, a model that never really accounted for them.
Wow. Okay, so it seems pretty clear the LAD has some major descriptive failures when you look at GLPs, which really begs the question, why? Why does a theory that seems to have these significant blind spots still hold so much power in linguistics and therapy and education? Why hasn't it sort of faded away by now?
That's a great question. And the reality is theories don't always disappear just because they have scientific problems or fail to describe everyone. Often they stick around because they're useful to established institutions and power structures.
Useful in what way? Convenient.
Institutional convenience is a huge part of it, yes.
Yeah.
Think about it. A tidy, internal, rule-based model, that's something you can easily code, you can quantify it, you can simulate it on a computer. It aligns really well with, say, machine learning metaphors of language as code.
Right, it makes things seem neat and measurable for research or assessment.
Exactly. It streamlines things for institutions.
And it provides that universal standard, right? This one single developmental path, one ideal way of speaking that defines what's normal.
Mm-hmm.
And by default, defines what's not normal.
Precisely. And from that simple binary normal versus impaired, whole economies spring up. You have diagnostic tools, specific therapeutic protocols, rubrics for special education eligibility.
All based on this model.
Often predicated on a model that defines the ideal by essentially erasing or pathologizing everything else. For GLPs, that erasure isn't just abstract, it's deeply material. It affects their education, their access to support, how they're understood or misunderstood.
When you put it like that, it feels like there might be even deeper things going on, like ideological forces keeping this model in place.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where insights from critical perspectives, like, say, feminist linguistics, become really powerful. Feminist linguists have argued for a long time that the whole idea of a single standard language isn't neutral, it's a construct.
The construct maintained by?
Maintained by institutions, often reflecting patriarchal power structures. The LAD, with its focus on an internal universal grammar processor, it subtly encodes a very particular ideal speaker, doesn't it? Fluent, analytical, maybe implicitly male-coded, probably monolingual.
And everyone else then becomes a deviation from that unspoken norm.
Exactly. A deviation needing explanation or intervention.
And I know there's also a post-colonial critique that takes this line of argument even further. How does that perspective view the LAD?
Yes, that's right. Post-colonial critiques frame the LAD as potentially part of a larger colonial project, essentially. The argument is that it takes Western norms of speaking analytical, syntax-focused, and universalizes them. Makes them the default, the standard for all humanity.
And then what?
And then it implicitly disciplines other ways of using language, other linguistic traditions, against that single norm. The scientific method itself, in this view, can become a form of control, sorting whose speech counts as legitimate, whose gets recognized, and whose is just dismissed or ignored.
So even the term language acquisition becomes loaded.
It can become suspect, yeah. Acquired from whom, in what context, and what's the cost to linguistic diversity when one model dominates.
So these critiques suggest the LAD isn't just a neutral scientific theory. It functions, perhaps unintentionally, as a kind of colonial artifact, one that declares a specific path, analytic, syntactic, maybe monolingual as the universal way, and renders other paths, like the gestalt path, as somehow less developed or needing correction. It ends up trying to manage difference, not just see it.
That's a really good way to put it. It seeks to control or normalize difference rather than simply observe and understand the diversity that's actually there.
Okay, so if we accept that the LAD, despite its influence, really can't describe how all humans come into language, what's next? What alternative frameworks could help us honor the real plurality of how language emerges? We're not just looking for LAD 2.0, are we? A new single device.
No, definitely not. That would just repeat the same mistake, right? Replacing one rigid model with another. I think the goal is more about finding space, finding permission for everyone to exist linguistically as they are. For GLPs, language isn't necessarily acquired, like a skill you learn step by step, or triggered like flipping a switch on a pre-programmed circuit.
How would you describe it then?
It's maybe more like relived, remixed, recalled from memory, deeply felt. It doesn't just spring from an internal grammar engine. It emerges from lived experience, from the emotional weight of moments, from meaning itself.
That's a very different picture. So if we embrace these other perspectives, how does it change our basic understanding of what communication even is?
Well, we can start to see language as gestalt, meaning words are rarely just abstract symbols. They often come packaged as scenes, as soundscapes, as emotional snapshots. We might start with these big, meaningful wholes and maybe only later break them down.
So meaning comes first.
Meaning comes first, absolutely. And context isn't just background noise, it's the foundation. We can also see language as fundamentally relational and co-regulated. Our ability to even access or use language isn't just internal, it's profoundly affected by our environment. Do we feel safe? What are the sensory additions like? Are we emotionally attuned with the people around us?
So language emerges between people, in a way.
Yes, often it emerges in that space of co-regulation through things like repetition, shared rhythm, pacing, just being present with someone.
That sounds much more embodied and holistic. And you mentioned rhythm and musicality earlier. There's a sensory aspect too.
Yeah. Huge. GLP language is often deeply sensory, rhythmic, and poetic. It can feel more musical than mechanical.
How so?
Well, we might speak in certain cadences, hear the rhythm in speech before the literal meaning, attach strong feelings to the sound of syllables or the rise and fall of intonation. Think about scripted language, or echolalia again. Why does it have such staying power? Not because it's empty.
But because it fits somehow.
Exactly. Because it fits. It fits in the body, it fits the feeling of the scene, it meets an immediate need. This kind of language builds meaning differently. Not always through sharp analytical points, but through accumulation, through resonance, through layers.
Like poetry almost.
Very much so. It tells the truth but tells it slant, as Emily Dickinson wrote.
It's really quite remarkable how these perspectives challenge the whole developmental story we're usually told about language. And I know there are emerging frameworks like natural language acquisition that are starting to document these GLP patterns more formally.
That's right, and that's valuable work. The key is to ensure these new frameworks don't just become new orthodoxies, new rigid boxes.
Right, we need to keep the diversity in view.
Exactly. As one GLP communicator described it beautifully, they said, language for them is carried in relational memory. It's a recursive narrative built over time. It's embodied knowledge. And they said, GLPs are not triggered. We are tuned.
Tuned, like a radio.
Sort of. Tuned into the environment, the relationship, the feeling. And that when the world gets too loud, too fast, too overwhelming, too wrong, they might tune out. The language, the potential for it, it's still there, waiting. Waiting for the right key, the right connection, the right moment to emerge again.
That is incredibly profound. It just completely reframes the picture. It makes you realize GLPs aren't failures of the standard acquisition model. They're not simply delayed. They could be seen as stewards of a different, equally valid linguistic tradition, one built on repetition, memory, emotion, rhythm.
Yeah. You know, Chomsky's LAD, it was designed perhaps to explain a very specific, maybe narrow slice of human linguistic experience, and then it tried to universalize that slice. It imagined a world that was tidy, full of rules, where language just unfolded cleanly, right on schedule.
But that's just not the reality for so many people. It's not how all humans come into language.
Its time as the dominant universal explanation has likely passed, not because we found one single correct replacement theory to rule them all,
but because the people whose experiences were erased or pathologized by that model are now speaking for themselves. Their experiences are becoming visible.
And we see how that LED model gave rise to whole industries, educational approaches. You mentioned the science of reading, earlier things built on a promise of neutrality.
But which in practice can end up punishing difference, right?
Yeah.
Leaving many learners misunderstood or behind.
Absolutely. If the lived experiences of Gestalt language processors don't neatly fit into the language acquisition device, the problem isn't with the GLPs. The problem is with the limitations of the model itself.
So what does all this mean for you listening right now? The fundamental issue, perhaps, isn't that GLPs fail to fit the established model. It's that the model fails to see, fails to appreciate the incredibly rich, diverse tapestry of human language in all its forms. How much meaning, how much communication, how much human insight might have been missed over the years by only listening for one kind of voice, one kind of structure. Maybe consider how your own understanding of language, of communication, of connection might expand, might deepen. When you make space, truly allow for these other equally valid ways of knowing and expressing in the world.